Várj, hol van? Nézem, Erza, nézem. Nagy geci vagy. Chatten nagy a szád mindig,
One
de
of the most important
nézzük,
discussions
nézzük.
in the gaming industry right now concerns a game called Dark and Darker, a game that was
Azt az egyébként hozzáteszem, hogy Devinnes azt is mondta, hogy akik a Twitch-en zenét hallgatnak, főleg a nagyobb amerikai streamerek, akik Twitch-en zenét hallgatnak, azok valószínűleg jogi balhéba fognak keveredni egy éven belül, és be fogják őket perelni a nagy zenészek, meg amit tudom, nagy vállalatok. Tehát csak mondom, hogy ilyet is mondott. Tehát, hogy biztos nagyon utána jár Devin, meg tényleg én is néztem egy csomó videót, meg ért is hozzá amúgy, hogy szedje össze, de
recently removed from Steam, a phenomenal game that is under allegations that it was stolen from a company called Nexon. There has been a ton of information around this topic, and we need to make sense of it. This is a video that answers the questions that everybody is asking. Is there legitimacy to Nexon's claims that this game is stolen? Is what Iron Mace is saying correct? What is the actual truth of this, and how do we break it down? And I have spent a ton of time sourcing this, so join me on this journey to figuring out the real truth behind Dark and Darker. And it turns out, I found out that this actually has implications to the entire gaming industry, and it goes way deeper than what we thought. All right, so this whole thing begins here on August 5th in 2021, where Nexon showcased 12 new games they were making. And one of these games, if you scroll way, there's a lot of games here, but if you scroll way down, you're going to see a kind of familiar image that is here. It's called P3. P3 was a project that is a survival dungeon experience with its...
Egyébként ezt mondom én is, amit Gergi mond amúgy, hogy amúgy jókat mond, utána jár, föl vannak írva dolgok, Erzát tüntessétek már el. Valaki vigye ki. A 90%-a nem úgy történik sose.
Internal to Nexon, and it was alleged that they were working on it for some time under a couple of big names that you're going to hear over and over again. So the first one you're going to hear is Ju Hyung Choi, and that is the lead dev of P3 at the time. Now, he actually left later, and we're going to talk about that.
Tudod, megállítom, bazd meg. Nem állítom meg, mert nem tudom, hogy hívják azt melyik volt poéba az a csávó, aki mindig az is kb. Így rakta össze a buildjét, bazdmeg. Így rakta kb. Össze a buildjét, azt ugyanúgy szenvedett állandóan, de úristen, ugyanez volt kb. Hogy Devin nincs csinálta.
With another person, a person named Terrence Park, who is the current CEO, also known as Parkmo, who is the current CEO of Iron Mace Games.
Várjál, most már Erza már nagyon ért a programozáshoz, úgyhogy most már belelát. Hogy te nem vagy itt AJ, akkor Erza megmondja mindig a tutit. Amikor megjössz AJ, akkor egyből visszalép egy kicsit. Git-logok persze, Git-logok nem jók.
So what happened was Mr. Choi basically asked Nexon, hey, since everybody's at home, I need to keep developing for P3. Can I have a server that sits at home and I can work on it with my employees? And Nexon said, sure, that's fine. And that went on for about a year as the COVID lockdowns continued. But then after a year, so after 1 year of working on P3 at home with team, Mr. Choi asked Nexon again if it was still okay to have the data at home on his personal server. At this point, Nexon says no. So basically, Choi agrees to that, as far as we know, and starts to remove files, but apparently keeps some stuff running. And in the response from Iron Mace to the situation, they actually confirm that. So they actually say, okay, they did have the data, and they did keep it. And at this point is where we start to see the problem. So shortly after this...
Ezt nem is értem, ez honnan ez az információ, mert ilyen információ nincsen, amit mond. Vagy nem, ez nem így történt. Vagy nem így volt leírva. A Nexonosok nem mondtak ki, a Nexonosok nem írtak ilyet, a Dark and Darkesek meg nem ezt írták. Tehát, hogy alapból már nem
stimmel. Now we're at June 2021.
Melyik ez?
In the timeline.
Most amit nézünk a Devin-es videó.
De mit mondod, mert nem hallom közben.
Mr. Choi of stealing the files from P3. Basically transferring them off his personal server onto another server somewhere else.
Mr. Nexon nem is mondott ilyet, Erza. Ezeket nem.
And here is where everything begins. All right. After this, and right during this point, both Terrence Park, who was the secondary developer and now the CEO of Iron Mace Games, and Mr. Choi leave Nexon to start a game studio. And
ez se stimmel, mert nem kiléptek, hanem kirúgták.
9 people from the 20-person team at Nexon go with them. All right. And then about 6 months-ish later, we have Dark and Darker. So that's basically the chronology of what happened. The first announcements were here in August, and I'm going to show you so many resources. Oh my goodness. So this is kind of the first announcement of P3. You can sort of see a lot of the projects they're working on, including P3 down here, and a little bit of an explanation of it and what it is.
So all
this goes on, and the development. And so the lawsuit actually begins. The actual lawsuit begins in July of 2021, very shortly after June 2021 when it was accused. And the lawsuit, this is where stuff starts to get really...
Erza, te tényleg hülye vagy, basz meg? Mármint értem én, hogy amúgy trollkodsz sokszor a chaten, de tényleg hülye vagy? Tehát akkor tényleg, jó.
Important and specific, and this is the kind of information I could not find from other people. So this lawsuit, which starts here, this is the resource, and I will have a Google Doc that links all of these resources because it took an incredible amount of time to find, and there's a lot of misinformation about this topic on the internet, especially from like Reddit and places like that. So the lawsuit begins
akkor is megállítom, de te tényleg hülye vagy, Erza, ez nem így működik. Akkor a nem az egyik fél írta, mert akkor a blog az azt írta helyesen, akkor a legegyértelműbb, vagy a legobjektívebb hozzáállás, ahogy föl lehetne vázolni ezt a TXT-t, ezt a jegyzettömböt, de ez hülyeség, amit mondasz. Mert ez akkor ez nem, tehát nem ez az igazság. Tehát nincs olyan, hogy akkor az egyik ezt mondja, a másik azt, és akkor a harmadik fél az, amit mond, úgy van. Akkor leírod azt, hogy mit állítottak a Dark and Darkeresek, mit lehetett kivenni abból, hogy mik azok, amik máshogy történtek mondjuk a másik fél szerint, és esetleg a harmadik fél szerint. De ez nem így megy akkor. Na, jó, ennyit erről. Tudod, mit ez a leítszarom majd. Megnézed, ha szeretnéd. Nem, szerintem meg te vagy a buta. De engem nem érdekel, úgyhogy ennyi. Nem, de hát mindegy, mit mond Erza. Tehát lehet, hogy hülye vagyok, de amit ő mond, az hülyeség. Tehát, hogy teljesen mindegy, hogy mit írt melyik fél, az, hogyha nincs kiderítve, hogy mi az igazság, már pedig itt állítólag nincs kiderítve, hogy melyik fél mit mondott, vagy mi az igazság, akkor nem írod le azt, hogy mi az igazság, mert akkor nincs kiderítve. Már pedig Devinnek a videójában le volt írva, hogy mi történt. Most akkor miért az történt? Én nem azt mondom, hogy azt írja, amit a Dark and Darkeresek írtak, hanem akkor legyen leírva az, hogy ki mit állított. És akkor ebből mit lehet leszűrni. Hogy ki mit mond. Ja, amúgy leszarom. Nem. Semmi nem volt pontos, amit leírt. Mármint... igazából bármi lehetett pontos, Tarsi, mert legalábbis abból, amit te mondasz, abból nem derül ki semmilyen igazság, csak amit a Dark and Darkesek leírtak, esetleg más valaki állított. Ezért mondom, hogy érzem, hogy én vagyok a hülye, de nem lehet komolyan venni egy idő után semmit, amit ír, mert vagy trollkodik, vagy pedig csak simán nem is értem. Tehát, hogy igazából mindegy. Nem megállapítottam, hogy szar, de az a baj Erza, hogy veled, igazából velem se lehet, tehát azt bevallom én is, velem nehéz vitázni, de tehát az, hogy nézzünk egy videót, amit mondtad, hogy nézzünk meg, és reagálok rá, mert megállítom, és tehát nekem nincs kedvem azt egy idő után, főleg, hogyha kicsit komolyabban veszem, mert amúgy egyébként elengedem és röhögök, azt nézni percenként, hogy magyarázza, hogy hanyatszorra állítottam meg magyarázza, hogy nem úgy van, akkor tehát nézd meg, azt reagálj rá, hogy szeretnél, engem nem érdekel. Tehát ezt meg teljesen mindegy, mit olvasol el, tehát hogy én is tudok állítani bármit. Az a cikkeket olvasott és onnan szűrte le. De te tényleg nem vagy normális, bazd meg, gyerekek, valaki magyarázza már el neki. Nem.
Most már érdekel, mit állít Erza?
Az egy dolog, hogy én factként elfogadom mondjuk azt, hogy mit írtak Discordon, de a videóban nem állítok factként teljesen mást azok alapján, amilyen cikkeket olvastam. Tehát azok sem lesznek factek azért, mert ő cikkeket olvasott. Tehát egy ilyen videóban akkor ne az legyen állítva, amit ő cikkekben olvasott factként, hanem akkor legyen leírva minden oldalról az, hogy mondjuk a cikkekben ezek vannak írva, a Dark and Darkenesek ezt írták, akkor mi lehet esetleg az igazság? Nem pedig factként leírni azt, hogy ő cikkekben mit olvasott. Ja, gondolom sok oldal. Hát jó, én meg nem hiszem el neki azokat az oldalakat, azért, mert ő úgy gondolja, hogy szerintem az az igazság, azért, mert David Nash. Vagy nem tudom, tehát, hogy szerinted sokat olvasott. Hát, ez meg főleg azok alapján, amilyen videói voltak az elmúlt, nem is az elmúlt, hanem inkább tavalyi év előtti 2 évben, azoknak a videóknak a 80%-a kb. Ahogy Gergi is mondja, teljesen máshogy történt, vagy más volt. Tehát, akkor nem fogok én se úgy hozzáállni, de egyébként ettől függetlenül nem is az, hogy nem kellett volna belinkelni, mert mindegy igazából jó, hogy belinkelt. Meg tudja nézni, aki szeretné, de amit te mondasz, attól még nem csak az a baj, hogy te se tudod ilyenkor elengedni, és akkor ilyenkor úgy állsz hozzá, aztán nem lehet veled beszélni konkrétan, csak szerintem nem veszed észre. Én mindig így reagálok, mert kretén vagyok, de viszont te meg ilyenkor, nem tudom, ilyenkor vagy túltolod, vagy én nem tudom. Szia, Tonyik! Szilivcsó. Meg az, hogy sok oldalt tud bemutatni. Hát a videó első 5 percében ugyanúgy factként van állítva, teljesen más. Én nem haragszom Erzára, azért mert így beszélek.
Igen.
Tessék, na, még egy kicsit akkor nézzük csak Erza kedvéért, mert én ilyen vagyok, ez vagyok én.
Secondary developer I will have a Google Doc that links all of these resources because it took an incredible amount of time to find, and there's a lot of misinformation about this topic on the internet, especially from like Reddit and places like that. So the lawsuit begins here. This is it, and the lawsuit specifically concerns a particular statute of Korean law. And this is a really important thing that we're going to, like, this is one of the most important things you're going to get from this video, is what this is about. So a lot of people think that this is a lawsuit about IP infringement, meaning that this is a lawsuit that concerns...
Azt a videót is meg kell nézni, amikor David Nash kiderítette, hogy XQC-t valószínűleg börtönbe fogják zárni, mert hogy annyi zenét hallgatott streamen.
Well, this is the same game that was made, and we want to take this down under DMCA because this was the same game as P3, and they can't do that. But what this lawsuit actually is a lot more important. It is a lawsuit concerning the Unfair Competition Prevention and Trade Secret Protection Act, okay? So Nexon is not alleging, necessarily, that... or really, it doesn't matter that the game is the same.
Nem pont így volt, de ez volt a lényege.
The P3 game being the same as Dark and Darker is not as relevant as the reality that of what's going on here. The concept that should people who are working at a company and have trade secrets, you're going to see that
mindig utána jár ilyen dolgoknak.
That have trade secrets, that know something
Van bármi igazság alapja?
about a project.
És sokszor amúgy nagyon okos, meg tényleg utána jár dolgoknak, hogy nagyon okosan elmondja, csak igen, hogy Gergő is mondta, hogy pár éve volt nem nagyon jött be semmi, ahogy ő azt így utána járt meg, így gondolta és elmondta, hogy mi lesz ebből.
So let's listen to that take right here.
But this especially. And I'll go a step further. Maybe we're getting into dicey, spicy territory here, but I'm just gonna say it with my whole chest. If all of Nexon's claims are accurate, Dark and Darker did take that idea from Nexon and build upon it. And even if they used a couple of assets that they developed while working at Nexon, in fact, I view them
Bár biztos, hogy másképp működik Koreában, mint itt Európában egyébként, de valami igazság alapja kell, hogy legyen.
Can suck the dirtiest part of my asshole. I cannot stand that company. I think that would be great if that really was the case.
All right. All my homies and I love Charlie, but I actually think this is kind of a more nuanced take than that. So Charlie's take is like, sure, like let's say that this actually did happen. Who cares? Like, let's let everybody go out of a company and go build something on their own. And I think this is kind of the opinion of a lot of people that loved Dark and Darker.
People that have that opinion.
Now, look, I'm about to say some pretty crazy stuff, so I'm just gonna click on this button right here. I'm gonna drag it over, and you're gonna see on my Steam. This is my Steam. See Devin Nash right there. Okay, playtime 72.9 hours on Dark and Darker. Okay, I am a enormous fan of this game. Like, I cannot tell you how much I loved this game and want it to come out. I am one of you, okay? So the stuff that I say in here is my best take at trying to give a non-biased opinion, all right? So there is something bigger at play here than just Dark and Darker coming out, which I really, really want to happen, all right? And the example I'm going to use is, let's say Blizzard is building Diablo 4, okay? And that there's a lead dev on that project, okay? And maybe some other devs. And those devs say, you know what? Like, it's like 6 months to a year or a year and a half into development. You know what? We don't really like Blizzard or Activision or kind of like what they're doing. They kind of have the predatory pay to win mechanics, and like they're kind of turning this game into something that we don't want. So we are going to go take all that stuff and we are going to leave. And we're going to build Diago 1. And it's going to be a game about angels and demons that fight each other, with ARPG elements where you run around a world and kill monsters. But it's not Diablo 4, it's Diablo. And anybody says that it's not that it's Diablo is wrong. And we could do it. Okay, so like, should they be able to do that? That is really what the entire thing of this is going to be about. And as we get into the really deep legal stuff, that is what this is about. Should people be able to walk away from a company with the knowledge that they have from that company and then immediately build a project and just quit and do it? Now, Charlie thinks that they should. And I think that the issue is a little bit more nuanced than that, because if this court case, to be clear, will set that precedent if it doesn't settle in Korea. It will figure that out. And what Nexon is coming after Iron Mace 4, I think a lot of people think that Nexon is like a really bitter company that's coming after Iron Mace because they are angry about Iron Mace's success. But everything that I've seen really points to Nexon being concerned that if they set this precedent that Iron Mace did, then what's just going to happen is that they're going to have like 8 projects they're working on within their company, and then anybody that just doesn't like what the company is about is just going to walk and go create their own game. And that kind of sucks for anybody in America or Korea or really anywhere that is trying to make games, right? Like if you're trying to make a game and you're a big studio and somebody just walks with that information, that kind of makes it really difficult for you to want to invest millions and millions of dollars into building games. So I just take, if you can, please, if you can. I know it's hard.
Darker, azt
take
mondta,
away
az a
everything we love
azért
Dark and take away the personal stuff, take away the truth that is like Nexon really incentivizes pay-to-win mechanics in games and make some really
hard pay-to-win mechanics
az egész
minden mechanika,
I with that. But we have to look at the gaming industry overall and say, what does this mean if this precedent is allowed? If this precedent is allowed that 2 employees that ran the project can walk with half the team over to another company and just build that game 6 months later, what does that mean for Blizzard? What does that mean for companies like 2K Games? What does that mean for every company that is investing millions of dollars in intellectual property and trade secrets to make games happen? That really will set a precedent that will change the whole gaming industry. So if you understand that, you kind of understand why Nexon is upset. And look, there's some bitterness that we're going to discuss in a little bit from Nexon that I think they are bitter in some ways, but we need to continue at this moment because I want to show you this because after, if you're following the chronology, we're now in the lawsuit, right, in July 2021. But now where I think all of you have picked up is on Nexon requesting a police raid and substantial investigation. So the lawsuit at this point is ongoing, all right? But now here in March of 2023, or I think this was February last month, a police raid happens. And that police raid is asked for in accordance to Article 215 of the Criminal Code. One thing that's really important to understand about Korea versus America is that Korean law system is what's called, sorry, let me just get this exactly right. The Korean law system is a little bit different than America's law system. So South Korea has what's called a civil law system, which is based on written codes, statutes, and regulations. And the United States has a common law system, which is based on the individual sort of case interpretations of things that happen when they go to court. So that means that like the law of the letter is much more important in Korea than it is
Aztán megyünk
balottraumázni, csak befejezem talán. Define later as we're going through this entire thing, you're going to figure out what is likely to happen as a result of that sort of
in
this case, okay? So Article 215 just says seizure, search, and verification. When necessary for criminal investigation, a prosecutor may request the district court to judge, seize, search, and verify in accordance with warrant issued, limited in cases where the circumstances suspect the suspect has committed a crime. So the crime is, again, going back here, the violation of the Unfair Competition Prevention and Trade Secret Protection Act. It's not a DMCA issue. It's not an IP infringement issue. They're saying Iron Mace had trade secrets at the people from Iron Mace that created Iron Mace had trade secrets at Nexon. They violated that this statute. Let's do a police raid and go get their stuff and confirm that. So the police raid it. The police actually do that. They're like, yeah, cool, makes sense. Everything's fine. We're gonna go we're gonna go see if that stuff is stolen. And here you go. Here in this article, the police raid Office of Game Developer accused of data theft. Now there are some conflicting things about what happened here. Iron Mace posted on their Discord that there was nothing found, and that nothing was taken. The police came up, had a very nice discussion, and then everybody left. The actual Korean police say they were there for several hours, and then they don't say what happened, and then they left. No one really knows what the truth is here.
Na, hogyha így mondja, akkor sokkal jobban megértem, hogy mi van.
But I'm going to say a statement here from Nexon, which says, the tech industry has long been sensitive about intellectual property data, but the Nexon Iron Mace case is especially important, as it could set a major example for future fights involving former employees developing their own games from leaked data. Should this case go unpunished, it would discourage game companies from investing in new game development and lead to a tighter grip on employees, leading to more rigid work environments. Insiders, if it becomes okay to steal assets of a company to make their own games, game companies will have no choice but to cut back on investment and new development. So that's from this article. They say this is anonymous. I'm pretty sure that's from Nexon. I guess I can't officially confirm that, so we'll just put that there. So Iron Mace claims at this point that nothing is taken. The police raid happens. Nobody really knows what happened. Now, a really important thing that happens around this time that I think everyone kind of missed in the news of this is this article here, which states that so Iron Mace, once they had their playtests it was unbelievably successful.
Booster, Magic the Gathering Booster Episode 10.
And loved it. I mean, it really is I could make a whole video about this, but it really is a throwback to the time when gaming like had actual risks and actual stakes. And I was so passionate about it. I loved it. I played it so hard, and I'm like counting the days from the alpha playtest that we're now going to figure out if it happens or not, because it was just such a good game. And I wasn't the only one that noticed that. Turns out there was a bunch of investors that noticed that specifically. Tencent, might know that name, League of Legends owner, big deal. Kakao Games, it says Hybe, it's a mistranslation. It's actually Hybe, which is a major media partner in Korea, and Krafton. All of these investors were at the table trying to give Iron Mace money. Now, about this time this police raid and these articles happen, all of these investors pull out. This is an extremely important thing that I'm particularly sensitive to as the owner of an agency. So investors pulled out at this point of the police raid, meaning that they were in discussions to give Iron Mace money, and then they go, whoa, they saw something. Well, right? Because we don't really know what happened with the police raid or whatever, but they saw something. Those investors saw something that scared them enough to say, we are not going to put money behind this. We're going to go. And now there are some
ez csak feltételezés.
Reports. I was looking and doing some research. There were some reports that said that Iron Mace had a 5% investment or something, or Hybe had given them $500,000 previously. I can't confirm that. There doesn't seem like there's enough reliable information to confirm that.
Azért mondom, hogy ezek csak feltételezések.
Did pull out at this point, saying basically around March 9th, basically saying, "Whoa, okay, this is super spooky." And this to me is one of the scariest things. If you
Persze, hát mármint, hogy miért kéne ennek, tehát hogy simán látják, hogy mondjuk ebből mondjuk gáz lehet, akkor visszaveszik a pénzt, vagy akár most nincs köze ahhoz, hogy mondjuk ez jogos is akár, vagy bármi.
A fan of Dark and Darker. Because if investors pull out and they're at the table, they know something is up, and
ők mindent tudnak
we're going to
akkor.
let this play out. And now at that point, that also means that Iron Mace may not have the funding to take on a fight with Nexon. We don't really know what their funding situation is. Some people have suggested they do a crowdfunding type thing, which probably be very successful because they currently have the like the media. They have like they have the crowd. They have like the arena is supporting Dark and Darker largely, at least in America. In Korea, it seems to be a little bit more nuanced. Okay, and so now we're at the point where the police raid happens. We don't know what happens to the police raid, but we know that Nexon is very passionate about this. Nexon also released a letter internally at this time to their employees, but from all my sourcing, I mean, you're gonna see my Google Doc. I have like 40 or 50 articles. There's so much here. I could not find that letter. I came across it once a couple of weeks ago when I was reading about this, but I can't find that letter. But basically what it said was, this is a letter from Nexon internally into their employees saying, hey, we are really passionate about this. We want to protect your work, and we feel like this was stolen. This was really bad, so like we're going to go after this. This is going to be a super big thing. And that's basically what that letter said. If anyone can find that letter in the comments, I'd really appreciate it. I'll update that drive. And then fast forward like 2 weeks. Now, Steam removes Dark and Darker totally from the store, and Nexon issues an IP infringement DMCA claim to Valve, which is the owners of Steam. And that is where we get into this. The legal letter and takedown of
Arnold és Porter.
DMCA notice. Now, remember I said that this is a trade secrets thing. So this DMCA notice is a little bit separate, and so basically the first thing that let's just break it down. Here's what Nexon says. Nexon says these guys stole our stuff, and you're going to see a lot of references. So on page 2, I've just got to make sure that all my notes are correct. You're going to see they say, based on our investigation, Dark and Darker appears to have been developed using trade secrets as well as copyrighted information. You see that word trade secrets again. Right? But under U.S. law, Iron Mace's actions constitute, among other violations, misappropriation of Nexon's trade secrets. Once again, that trade secret law, such as source codes, art resources, etc. Right? So Nexon began developing the game. We just covered that. And here are the patents that were issued in order to show that like this was like Nexon's work. But interestingly, all of these were filed in February of 2023. So this is kind of bogus because the Nexon lawsuit in Korea was happening since 2021. So Nexon basically goes and trademarks this stuff long after, even like this is after like the playtest. This is after they know that Dark and Darker is popular. That's kind of weird, right? But they're doing this. They got those trademarks so they could issue this DMCA and IP infringement case. So they're basically telling Valve, hey, these guys stole our game, And let's read this part, which is really important. Please be advised, if Valve does not take down all versions of Dark and Darker on Steam, then Valve may be liable for direct and indirect copyright infringement, as the DMCA requires Valve to respond expeditiously to remove or disable access to the material that was claimed to be infringing. Whoa. Okay. So why was Dark and Darker removed from Steam? Why was Dark and Darker removed from Steam? Because Valve has to comply with DMCA requests until the parent company challenges it. Meaning, it works exactly the same on other platforms like Twitch or YouTube. If someone submits a DMCA complaint, the burden of proof is on the people that were complained against. So Iron Mace has to submit a counterclaim through the U.S. law system and say, no, it is not stolen. We allege that that is not true. And then Valve will just put it back up. So a lot of people think that the removal from Steam was like the sort of pinnacle moment. It's just the one that got the most press. Valve does this all the time. They have to comply. They have to, because if they don't, this happens. Exactly right here, right? Valve is not going to stick their neck out in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit case against a $20 billion company, which is what Nexon is, right? And just be like, yeah, sure. Well, we don't think that's true, so we're just going to leave it up. They don't care. Valve is a platform. So just understand that
Jó van már, mi a
this
fasz
game got
magyarázom.
released a few days ago at the time of this recording. All it means is that Valve has to comply. It doesn't necessarily suggest anything about the case. It doesn't make it more or less likely that Iron Mace actually stole the game or not. None of it, right? It could have been basically bogus DMCA claims get filed all the time. And this could have been one of them. It could have been a DMCA claim that just says, hey, you can't do this, man. This is our game. And then Valve has to be like, all right, well, until that is sorted out, we are removing that from the store. So just understand that's the case here. That's what happened. But it turns out that this letter actually is really, really informing of some of the stuff that Nexon thinks and what is really going on. So one of the major defenses that people are saying, you'll hear this in a lot of influencer videos, is that this game is not a copy because it uses a lot of Unreal assets, and that's fine, right? And you even see stuff like this where you can see the P3 game, this is Nexon's original thing. You can see Dark and Darker here, a very similar looking wizard, and then a very similar looking wizard again from Lord of the Rings, a very similar wizard looking again from Warhammer, and then Chewbacca wearing a wizard hat, which also looks very similar. All right. So the argument from a lot of, I think, the public here is that, well, wait a minute, this is a game about fairies, Dungeons and Dragons, elves, and orcs and stuff, and that's like really the same thing, right? Anybody can talk about this stuff. It comes back from like Dungeons and Dragons and like Tolkien lore. Who knows who concocted the first word of elf? Maybe elf was from the 1400s in Ireland, where real elves still existed, like Shadowrun, and the first elf was conceptualized there. Like, we don't know, right? Like, so maybe it's like the same thing. So the argument from the public has been that, but Nexon actually acknowledges that argument and says, no, this is actually like this is the same thing, right? Like, they're not saying just because these are both fantasy games that's the reason that's the same thing, all right? And they're also not saying, this is a really important thing, because a lot of people the Iron Mace themselves are kind of sitting on the defense that like these are just assets from the Unreal Engine. But Nexon addresses this and says, even if one takes into account that both games were developed using the same program, i.e. Unreal Engine, the number of identical file names is too substantial for mere coincidence. We put this in Exhibit D. So here in Exhibit D, we're going to go through some of this. These are patent claims. Okay. Here in Exhibit D, you're going to see a list of file names, and Nexon explicitly says these are, like, we exclude the number of files essentially included in the Unreal Engine itself. More than 1,000 files still have the same file names. So these are not Unreal Engine asset files. These are just files that Nexon is claiming they just literally stole from P3, all right? And you can just see this, like, all this stuff. So just take the Unreal, I don't actually think that the Iron Mace argument of, well, he just uses Unreal assets really holds water here. And if you read the description here, it gets kind of crazy. It sounds like pretty specific. The character designs and other...
Egyébként ezt azért hozzáteszem, hogy ez a videó 23 órával ezelőtti, és konkrétan ma reggel 2 óra 37-kor rakták föl Discordra az összes asszetet, amit vásároltak, és a izékre is válaszoltak azokra az asszetekre, amik ugyanazok voltak állítólag.
Wizard, Thief, and Rogue and Ranger. Okay, not really big problem there. Again, there could be an argument made. It's like, well, those are like really common D&D classes. Anybody could kind of use those classes. But then we get kind of weird. Further, the P3 game takes place in the dungeon of dark brick walls, which is intended to portray a dark and fearful atmosphere, and includes torch-related game features, which allow users to light up or extinguish torches installed in the dungeon to increase or decrease visibility. Dark and Darker takes place in that same brick wall dungeon setting with the same torch game features. It's no coincidence the characters and settings are also aesthetically similar, and it's clear that Iron Mace used Nexon's data to create even as Iron Mace argued in media statements, the graphic assets were purchased from the Unreal Marketplace. It doesn't explain the assets of the characters in Dark and Darker characters that were different from those of the graphic
Igen,
assets
van Squad Stream,
but identical to
már el is fogadom.
the comparison of characters and setting structural designs is made in Exhibit E.
Hülye
And
Mário,
this is kind of the most damning
bazzeg.
thing for Iron Mace currently is Exhibit E here.
Péniszt.
And Exhibit E, if you
az
go
mind
down,
mai.
basically puts a side-by-side comparison of both the classes and the themes, as well as the sort of like mechanics that happen within Dark and Darker. And this is why you're going to start
Hát ez
to
még a
see there might be
múltkorikat
some
nézi az
trouble
öcskös.
from in terms of like trying to justify that this is really a unique IP and game. A lot of these assets are very similar, but more importantly, the theme of the game, the elements of the game, the original sort of feeling of P3 has been claimed by Nexon to be the same. And I think that claim holds quite a bit of water under the Trade Secrets and Unfair Competition Protection Act, because all Nexon needs to really do is basically say, look, they couldn't have had this idea. This is a really good way to say it. They could not have had this idea if they hadn't worked for us, if they hadn't been working together at the studio, which had ideas from all these different people,
Na egyébként, hogyha valamikor most Tarsi mondaná, akkor most itt mondjuk egyet tudnék érteni. Lehet, hogyha nem dolgoztak volna ott, akkor nem lett volna ez az ötletük, de hát bassz meg.
Themed in all these different ways. They couldn't have had this idea unless they were working at Nexon. There's no way that in their own vacuum that them and the other 9 people could have just built this whole game. They clearly took these trade secrets and this knowledge from Nexon to create this game. So again, that's not an IP issue, right? That's an issue of trade secrets being appropriated. Like in the exact same way that if someone is working at Lockheed Martin and they're building the new super fighter, they run over the Raytheon with a team of 10 people and then they build that super fighter, that would be a major issue in U.S. courts, right? That'd have to get sorted out, just like it has to get sorted out here. So, okay, so now we're
caught up. Itt alapján nem is ez a lényeg, hogy most használták az ötletet.
You understand everything that's happening, all right? Hopefully, there is still going to be a lot of arguments, like did they steal the game or did they not, like between the community. But do you understand? It's like kind of less important whether they did that or not. Really, what is important to determine is was enough of the intellectual property and enough of the trade secrets that were made at Nexon relevant to basically give enough ideas, enough thoughts to the developers subjectively to go build this game at Iron Mace. And that is really what the court is going to determine. And the court's going to determine that under some kind of interesting statutes that we're going to talk about here in this act here. So the argument's going to continue. I don't really know the answer. I think that it's pretty damning how close it is, and that Nexon is probably going to be able to make this argument. And I think we're going to talk about that next, and like what could specifically happen, and like all the possible stuff that's going to happen. So let's do that. But before we do that, we are 27 minutes into a Devin Nash video. Hey, this took a lot of work. If you want to support this, please subscribe. I cover all kinds of stuff in the media and gaming industry. Also, I have a Patreon where I teach a lot of business and kind of marketing concepts.
Ezt a részét nem tudjuk, és ezt magyaráztam Tarsinak is, hogy itt tehát még ebben a videóban sem volt kitérve arról, hogy mi volt az ő szerződésükben, és hogy ezt megszekték-e.
On just all kinds of different topics about business things like that. So check that out, patreon.com/devnash. Join my Discord server, discord.gg/dev, where we have discussions with stuff like this. But overall, just you don't have to do anything.
Ebbe egyetértettem Tarsival is. Csak azt mondtam, hogy ezt mi nem tudjuk, és nem volt ilyen vád. Hogy a szerződésükben ez volt benne, és hogy azt használták föl, nem. Simán csak az volt benne, hogy ellopták.
Well, what's gonna happen, all right? What is the truth of it? Now you understand everything. And again, I have a lot of time in Dark and Darker, so I'm really rooting for Iron Mace here. But the situation is kind of grim. Let's explain why. Well, number one, the largest companies such as Samsung, Hyundai have ties to government, wield significant influence in various economic sectors in South Korea. So South Korea doesn't really work the same way as the United States law system works. Here over in the United States and English-speaking countries, we kind of think of law in a little bit of a different way than South Korea does. South Korea has a civil law system, as I mentioned before. The United States has a common law system. The Korean legal system is based on written code, statutes, and regulations, but the U.S. legal system relies heavily on case law and judicial precedent. The difference in legal culture leads to different outcomes and perceptions regarding corporate favoritism. So South Korea has had a few examples of corporate favoritism. And generally, when thinking about the South Korean legal system, the world sort of views the South Korean legal system as being favored for corporations. Now, a big part of that is because corporations are so hugely part of Korean culture. They are in America too, but I mean, like they have like literal ties, like people that work in the government also work in different corporations within South Korea. And the Korean legal system has been seen in the past to have some criticism regarding corporate favoritism. Here's a couple of examples of that. So SK Group, for example, which is a major Korean corporation, was let off on a presidential pardon from the then president of South Korea, and it was criticized heavily as the government being too lenient with corporate executives convicted of white-collar crimes. This is for embezzling allegedly $42 million. Also, Lot Group, another very huge corporation within South Korea, was sentenced to 2.5 years in February 2018. However, an appellate court just suspended the sentence and said, hey, it's fine, go back to running it. And everyone was like, wait, what? So there's been several cases of criticism, a lot of people think legitimate criticism, that South Korean courts favor corporations. Now, Nexon is a $20 billion company, and Nexon is coming into this full swing and completely intending to set a precedent for the whole gaming industry. Because it's not so much for Nexon about P3. They canceled P3, right? So P3 was over. What it's really about is they don't want to go make the next 20 games they make, and then somebody walking out of Nexon with one of those games is likely to be the most popular game. And instead of Nexon making all those millions of dollars, that person does. That's what they really don't want. So that is the precedent they are fighting to set, and they will put all of their resources towards that. Now, it's worth noting that in recent years, Korea has addressed these problems of corporate favoritism and tried to create.
Ezekre a dolgokra nem tudunk válaszolni priat,
mert
így is ezt mondtam meg én is, ezen izéltünk, hogy miért tartott ennyi ideig ez az egész, mert volt már egy csomó alfa-teszt, volt azért egy per az emberünk ellen, aki ugye alapvetően ki lett rúgva, és úgymond az ő gépén voltak a dolgok. De nem volt ez ellen semmi téve korábban, tehát már megtehették volna ezt akkor is, amikor az első playtest kiment, hogy itt van ez a játék, már akkor is tudtak volna szerintem ezzel bármit kezdeni valószínűleg.
Like for example, one of the issues that have come up here is that it's very hard to like fire an employee in South Korea. So if Nexon let this employee go, then they did it with a lot of evidence usually, because they have to justify that under the statutes that are in South Korea. And it's not easy to fire a person. Like Nexon wouldn't do that lightly. That'd be a very serious thing. So understanding that, you kind of understand like where this is going, because this fight will be over if Iron Mace violated Korean law, specifically the Unfair Competition Prevention and Trade Secret Protection Act. And that precedent will set what the gaming industry can do going forward, which is why it's really important. So let's go over what is actually going to happen and all of the possibilities. I think there's about 6, okay? And here they are. This is kind of the meat and potatoes. Whoops. Using Notepad. That's right. Number 1, which is obvious, the fight will probably favor Nexon. Okay, so
ezt mondom, hogy azt,
and you kind of understand all
ezt mondtam én is Tarsinak is, meg Erzának is, hogy azt nem látjuk. Értem én, hogy benne van a szerződésben, meg hogy így, meg úgy a szerződés, de hát itt még a videó, még Devin se tért ki, aki 40 cikket olvasott el mindenről.
Provided it kind of looks like Nexon has a good case here. Let's kind of go through all the possibilities. Nexon wins totally. That's number 1. The Project D&D is unable to continue. Nexon either picks up P3 again because they see the popularity, or they trash the whole thing since it's about the precedent. And then going forward, there are stricter kind of regulations about like what employees can and can't do concerning like when they walk away from a company. Maybe there's some sort of subjective timeline. Okay, like a non-compete that's like 6 months to a year after you can't do anything that's like related to this IP or project, and that just has to be determined. So that's a total win for Nexon. Nexon like literally gets to redefine that law. D&D is just not able to continue. It just dies, and then we never hear from it again. I mean, like maybe Nexon. So I think in this case, there are so many people and game studios that have sort of taken note of Dark and Darker's type of success and that kind of game, the sort of like fantasy extraction type of game. There's so many people that have taken note of that they will be likely to develop that.
De én ezt értem, Tarsi, meg ezzel egyet is értettem. De hogy ezt nem látjuk meg a izébe. Jó, lehet, hogy én is kerekítettem azzal, hogy azt mondtam, hogy nem ezek a vádak voltak, de nem így voltak fogalmazva a vádak, tehát hogy nem szerződésszegés volt itt. Bár lehet, hogy ezt úgy értik, de hogy tehát nem volt erre kitérve, hogy ez meg az van a izébe.
Maybe we are going to hold the individuals accountable, the 2 people who did the majority and took this information, allegedly, right? We're going to hold those people accountable, and they're going to be subject to jail time or fines or all kinds of different stuff. That's mainly going to be those 2 people's problems. But we are cool with Dark and Darker continuing as long as it's heavily modified. All the files that were taken are replaced, and all the assets are replaced to a certain sort of subjective court determination. It's like, okay, we think this is a meaningfully different product. So look, Iron Mace, you can still work, but you need to change these things, and your 2 CEOs are hosed. And this is probably like the most likely outcome, like a partial win, where Dark and Darker maybe can continue in some way, but it kind of loses its vision. I worry this might as well be as bad as a total win because it will lose its 2 main developers and its vision, and I'm not sure it can continue. But number 3 is maybe Nexon actually loses partially, and the Project D&D can continue, and Nexon has to pay some fees, or the
Jó, akkor ilyen alapon teljesen igazad van, Tarsi, akkor azokkal szekték meg, amik oda voltak írva, viszont mindegyik szerződés szegésre, ami úgymond a szerződés szegésben foglalt vádra tudtak reagálni az Iron Mace-esek egy olyan dologgal, ami elvileg bizonyítja, hogy nem szekték meg a szerződést.
Much more likely given how the way that the Korean law system works now that you understand it based on this video, the resources that I found, the way that this particular statute reads, which I didn't choose to go through in this video because it would take another 30 minutes, and it's already going to be a really long video, but you can go read this for yourself. It's going to be linked in the Google Doc in the description, and you can see that it's like pretty clearly in Nexon's favor the way that this is written. And again, you have to understand that like Korean courts do not make the same subjective interpretations of law that United States courts do to favor individuals. They do based on statute. So like the Korean law is going to be interpreted against Iron Mace in what this is said.
És ez a videó biztos, hogy nem tér ki arra, mert ez egy mai dolog, ez pedig egy tegnapi videó.
That favor Nexon heavily. I encourage you to read this. It's all public. I'll link it in the Google Doc in the description. All right, so the Nexon. People love Dark and Darker, and like I think a lot of people are putting blinders on and being like, listen, especially because of Nexon, right? Like Nexon goes back to Maple Story. I'm a huge gamer myself. I'm a super closet goblin. I play games all the time, so I completely understand where people are coming from with the Nexon thing and like the Maple Story stuff, the pay-to-win mechanics, the mobile games, all of it. Basically, the opinion of Nexon in English-speaking countries is extremely negative, and people are using that reality in combination with the really honestly like positive PR spin that Iron Mace has been putting on their Discord. Iron Mace recently just posted this like whole long thing disputing this, even using ChatGPT 3 to show that like you could develop a game similar. I just don't think I've read that whole response. I didn't go through it in this video because I just don't think it holds a lot of water. I think that what is actually legally being said here is much more important. And just understanding that that most of what Iron Mace might not completely understand what they're fighting themselves. They may think that this is like and what they're responding to with that huge this one I'm referring to. Let's see if I can find this specifically. Is the this post here? It's like a really long character concepts post. We'll just pull up like the paint here. And, I mean, I can't even show you all of it, but it goes on and on and on. There's been other YouTube videos that go through this. You can also go to Discord to see this. But you can see that like there is a summary here at the end which says, it's difficult to believe that Nexon in good faith could reasonably believe that Iron Mace has infringed the copyright. There's no actual evidence that Iron Mace misappropriated trade secret information from the creation, but instead based on circumstantial claims. They accuse Iron Mace of a flagrant breach of Valve's rules, basically around DMCA, but we don't think they did it. And we think that this is baseless. Okay, but that's really addressing the DMCA claim itself, which is like that this is an IP infringement, and not really the trade secret claim, which is kind of like the way bigger issue, right? Now, like, is it DMCA is an IP infringement? Like, that's like going to be for courts to decide. That's a whole other issue that I
ez teljesen mindegy amúgy.
Yeah, and that leads
Jó,
to
azt lehet, hogy kicsit túl magyaráztam, de azt teljesen mindegy, hogy mit állítottak Discordon, mert azokat a dolgokat, amik nekik meg kell. Ez igazából csak annyi, hogy ők úgy gondolják, és ők úgy gondolják, hogy nem szektek meg semmiről. És az már nem is az, hogy elég, mert ez nem azt jelenti, hogy mondjuk akkor nyernek, hogyha ők úgy gondolják, már pedig valószínűleg azért nem tudom, miért gondolnák úgy, hogyha nem sok értelme lenne. Mondjuk attól függően nem is kell végül is értelmének lennie.
Or hey, we just want this amount of money and then we'll go away. Who knows, right? There could be a settlement. But I actually think this is not very likely. I think Nexon is pretty confident in their win. I think they understand the statute. I think they've got big lawyer teams, and the lawyers have been like, "You've got a slam dunk case. You're gonna be very likely to win this. Take the fight to them." And number 6 is something that a lot of I have seen you guys, some of you guys that are the big Dark and Darker supporters admit this, is that Nexon just burns IM out of resources. Like, so this is super possible. Right? Nexon's a $20 billion company, and they just go, "Hey, okay, cool. We're just gonna lock this up in court until IM dies." Right? We'll keep the game off Steam. As of yet, Steam has or Iron Mace has only had public playtests for free. And so the playtests haven't made them any money. There's no microtransactions, there's no shop. So we don't know how Nexon is getting their money. Sorry, how Iron Mace is getting their money. It could be as simple as those 2 people that left Nexon are taking their paychecks and running this on rice and beans, and like there's no investor money. It could be that like allegedly Hyde put in $500,000. We don't know how much money they have, but what we do know is that Nexon has more. Nexon has a lot more. So if Nexon really wants to, and this is one of the reasons why I think like a partial or total win for Nexon is likely, even if the courts don't rule in their favor, which they again have a lot of precedent to do. Nexon's will be like, yeah, all right, we're gonna keep them in court for 2 years. They can't release their game. It's not gonna be on Steam. Public interest is gonna die eventually in this. Like there'll be a cult following of people that are on the Dark and Darker subreddit that are like, I want to play a Rager. They'll still be that, right? But like this like real big hype that's like kind of been invented by Twitch.
Most az más, hogy Tarsi
is gonna kind of burn out.
amúgy teljesen igazad van. Teljesen igazad van.
We're gonna bring them all in, put them down, filibuster. Like, all right, let's talk
de itt most nem a bíróságról van
like,
szó, és nem is arról van szó, hanem itt ráadásul nem is csak az, hogy most minek vallják magukat, hanem megmondják, hogy tehát ők azt nyilatkozták azoknak az emberek, akik foglalkoztak a játékukkal, meg igazából a Discordos közösségnek, akik nem is feltétlenül, hogy már pedig nem csináltak ilyet, és hogy itt vannak a bizonyítékok. Tehát most az, hogy mondjuk minek vallják magukat, az is egy dolog, meg azt is, hogy mondjuk megpróbálják bizonyítani is, hogy nem volt ilyen.
That was in like 4 days. Like 5 days of whatever that playtest was, okay? Like, I'm there with you. I love this game. I also love the mission that Iron Mace has, where they're going out and they're saying, look, we believe in like a world of like, if you just go to Iron Mace's website, it's just so cool what their like messaging is. It's like, look, like gaming has changed. It's not as cool as it used to be. We're just a group of people that are disappointed to see exploitative practices and casinos in games. The reason why the public is behind these people, the reason why they have the hearts of gamers, as they say, is because their mission is so good, especially against like the great. This is literally a David and Goliath story. This is biblical, man. It goes all the way back to like the evil big corporation, the giant, right, fighting the little person that everybody's sort of rooting for, and it's so unlikely that little person is going to win, because they're little and they can't beat the big giant, right? And maybe they'll use the sling and they'll throw it in the eye, and the giant will fall over, and everybody will cheer, and that person will become king, right? That's the old biblical story that everybody is kind of hoping happens here, okay? But that's a story. Most of the time, the giant's just like, ooh, little human, right, and just absolutely crushes the person, okay? And that's like what's gonna happen. I'm sorry, that's what's gonna happen probably here, right? Like, especially in a South Korean law system, maybe in the United States where like individual rights are more of a thing. It's like, hey, like, okay, this is kind of like a non-compete issue. It's gonna depend on the state.
És akkor itt mondom rá azt, hogy nem mint hogyha tudnám, hogy mi fog történni, meg nyilván ebben igazatok volt, meg Erza is magyarázott itt. De sokszor volt ez, hogy Devin ezt mondta, hogy hát igen, nem akar itt ezt tüzélni, de valószínűleg ez fog történni, és akkor utána látjuk, hogy évekkel később ófasz nem történt semmi köze, nem volt hozzá, mit gondol.
My main game right now, and it has been for 4,500 hours, been Path of Exile. I love that game. I think it speaks back to the old OG stuff about gaming. Dark and Darker, I was going to switch to it. It's going to probably main game Dark and Darker and just play that game. And I loved it. Now I'm looking into Albion Online because I truly just like don't see the future for Dark and Darker. I really hope that I'm wrong. But the claims from Nexon seem pretty legit, and they have a lot going on. So I hope that people can take this video as what it is, which is a lot of work put in 45 minutes to try to explain exactly what the situation is as non-biased as possible from a person who really loves Dark and Darker and loves the mission of this company. Like, dude, I reached out to Dark and Darker. My agency Novo was like, we will run your entire brand marketing for free before all this stuff dropped. And by the way, that offer is still legit. like we would just run it. We would run their marketing campaign, and I wouldn't take a percentage of it because like which is our standard monetization model. Because I'm so passionate about this game just existing, right? So I'm 100% there. But man, it doesn't look good. It just does not look good. Oh, okay. So that's sad because gaming. Hopefully, the one thing from this, right, is that people have seen the need for a video game that has that authenticity, that has that old feel to it, that has real risk and stakes, and it's not about there's enough people that see that and go, this could be a huge deal, this could be very popular, we can still make a lot of money, but we don't have to do these like casino loot box practices that have just become so exhausting in modern gaming. We don't have to do these super handheld experiences where you have a skill tree that goes through 25 levels and there's really 4 choices, but there's only one, like a game that won't be mentioned, right, that was mentioned in this video. Okay, like we are instead going to make a game that is intentionally very difficult, that isn't easy to solve, and there's a lot of people waiting for a game like that, and people that have been waiting for that game for 10 years. So please release it. Okay, if you're listening to this video, I know a lot of game developers listen to my channel. It works. It's a good model. But in the meantime, we can only hope that Dark and Darker sorts this out. And unfortunately, it's unlikely to be so. Hey, that's the video. That's the truth. That's what you come here for. If you liked it, follow. Even if you don't like it, you might want to follow because you might want the real information instead of like the bias you see everywhere, which is like, oh, I love this thing, but it's and because I love it, it's this person is wrong. That's not how the real world works. We've got to be real. So I try to keep this channel real. And if I've done that successfully or unsuccessfully, let me know in the comments. Thank you everybody for taking 46 minutes of your life to listen to this video about a subject you obviously care a lot about. And I appreciate you, and I'll see you again very soon.
Tehát én szerintem nem fog odáig elhúzódni. Vagy tényleg izé lesz.